Welcome the Lord's chosen. Every villain thinks they are untouchable until God starts checking the evidence. There comes a moment in life when heaven stops watching and starts writing warrants. You can feel it in the air, that divine stillness right before justice breaks the silence. It is not karma. It is not coincidence. It is divine correction on schedule. The very people who tried to bury your purpose are now digging their own verdict. See, some of them truly believed they were beyond consequence. They thought connections could cover corruption and charm could erase crime. But God doesn't forget the fine print of betrayal. He archives it. Every trap, every lie, every false accusation was time-stamped in eternity. And now the alarms in the unseen are going off. Their names are echoing in heaven's courtroom. The truth is, they couldn't end your life because they never wrote it. Your story had divine ownership, and only its author has the authority to close the book. What they didn't realize is that survival is the loudest testimony. Because when you are still standing, it means the investigation is still active, and here is the irony. The same mouths that once said are now praying their Wi-Fi doesn't cut off when the evidence goes viral. That is not vengeance, that is balance. That is God restoring divine order, one revelation at a time. So when you see the tables turn, don't blink, don't gloat, just understand. You were never fighting people, you were outlasting sentences, because the moment they plotted your end, they started writing their own. And God, He is just now pressing send. Number 1, God let them build their own trap. Some people really thought they were outsmarting you. They smiled in your face, shook your hand, and plotted behind your back, all while believing they were steps ahead. What they didn't realize was that God wasn't ignoring their schemes. He was watching their blueprints unfold. Sometimes He doesn't stop the setup because the evidence needs to mature. He allows them to keep building, keep talking, keep digging, until the trap they designed for you becomes the same one that swallows them whole. That is the kind of justice that doesn't rush. God lets people reveal themselves. He will let them get comfortable, let them boast about their so-called victories. Let them believe they have won. It is not because He is asleep. It is because exposure works better when it is undeniable. If He interrupted their plans too early, they would have denied everything. But now they have left fingerprints on every lie, every plot, every move they made. What is wild is that during this process, you probably questioned everything. You wondered why He didn't step in sooner, why it seemed like they kept getting away with it. But while you were feeling defeated, God was setting the final scene. He was letting them keep talking themselves into guilt, keep stacking the evidence higher until even they cannot escape the truth anymore. He is strategic like that. Slow to act, but precise when He does. And when the trap finally closes, it doesn't just catch them. It exposes everything they have built around deception. Their alliances start crumbling, their lies start contradicting, and suddenly the very system they used to protect themselves starts turning against them. That is divine symmetry. When evil collapses under the weight of its own design, you didn't need to defend yourself because God was collecting proof. You didn't need revenge because He was recording everything in real time. Every insult, every setup, every attempt to destroy you was silently being turned into evidence. And now their downfall will not come from your words. It will come from their own actions echoing back at them. God let them build it because He knew they wouldn't stop until they trapped themselves. And when He finally shuts the case, everyone will see that the setup was never your ending. It was their exposure. Number 2. What they planned in secret became God's documentation. They thought nobody saw them. The late-night conversations, the quiet messages, the sneaky decisions behind closed doors. They believed their secrecy made them safe. But nothing escapes God's record. Every hidden move they made against you was being documented, not by people, but by heaven itself. The things they whispered in the dark are now the same things being shouted in divine light. What they thought was private planning was really public evidence in the spiritual realm. God doesn't need cameras or microphones to catch a plot. He hears the intent before the words even form. While they were carefully weaving their lies, God was quietly filing every thread. They thought they were covering their tracks. But every cover-up became another entry in the case against them. That is how divine justice works. It collects proof while pretending to stay silent. When they gossiped, manipulated, or tried to destroy your name, it wasn't lost in the air. It was stored when they used your kindness as a weakness. It wasn't forgotten. Heaven doesn't erase injustice. It archives it until the right time. And now that time is approaching. You are not just being vindicated, you are being used as evidence that God sees everything. What makes it even more powerful is that you never had to expose them yourself. You didn't chase rumors, you didn't fight back, you didn't need to prove anything. God was the one writing the report. Every lie they told about you added more credibility to your truth. Every secret meeting they held to break you became another line in their spiritual indictment. And now the irony is painful. The very things they did in confidence are the same things being revealed without your effort. God doesn't just punish. He reveals patterns. He exposes motives. He lets everyone see how premeditated the wickedness was. That is why their downfall will feel so surgical, because it is not emotional. It is documented. Their plans were their confession, their secrecy was their signature, and now God is opening the file they didn't know existed. Everything they did to destroy your name is now building your testimony. They didn't realize that while they were trying to silence your story, they were actually writing God's proof that no weapon formed against you ever truly prospers. Number 3. They mocked your delay, not knowing it was their countdown. They laughed at you because they thought nothing was happening. To them, your stillness looked like failure. Your silence looked like surrender, and your patience looked like weakness. But what they couldn't see was that heaven doesn't rush justice. It times it. While they were celebrating what looked like your downfall, God was quietly counting down the seconds to their exposure. The delay they mocked was never a pause in your purpose. It was a divine setup for timing that would make the truth undeniable. People often mistake quiet seasons for defeat because they are addicted to visible results. They think if you are not making noise, you are not making progress. But in reality, God was doing what he always does best. Working in the background, aligning everything to hit at once. He let them get comfortable enough to think they had won. He let them dance around, confident in their illusion of victory, not realizing they were celebrating their own expiration date. Every time they laughed at your struggle, they were actually confirming your strength. They thought your delay meant God forgot you, but they never realized that he was observing how far their arrogance would stretch. He was letting them talk freely, move carelessly, and act boldly, because pride always accelerates its own destruction. What they called your waiting season was actually their warning period, and they ignored every sign. When God finally moves, it is never subtle, it is swift, precise, and public. The same people who mocked you will be the ones replaying old conversations in their minds, wishing they had stayed quiet. They will realize too late that while they were making jokes about your delay, heaven was finalizing their judgment. That is how divine timing works. It exposes everything that human arrogance tries to hide. You weren't behind. You were being positioned. You weren't forgotten. You were being fortified. God didn't stop them early because he wanted the exposure to be complete. And now that the clock has hit zero, their laughter sounds different, shaky, uncertain, haunted. The countdown wasn't yours, it was theirs. What they mistook for your ending was actually the ticking of their own downfall, getting louder with every careless word they spoke against you. Number 4. You were the test. They failed without knowing. You weren't sent into their lives by accident. God placed you there on purpose, not to be destroyed, but to reveal what was truly hiding inside them. They thought you were the one being evaluated, but the truth is, you were the assignment sent to expose their character. Your presence was never about approval or belonging. It was a spiritual test of their integrity, and they failed it without even realizing they were being graded. They were given a chance to show loyalty, kindness, and honesty, but instead they chose jealousy, deceit, and manipulation. They thought they were getting away with mistreating you, not knowing every action was being recorded in heaven's ledger. God didn't need to test your strength. He already knew your heart. What he needed was to expose theirs. That is why some doors closed suddenly. Some relationships fell apart. And some people turned against you for no reason. It wasn't chaos. It was revelation. They assumed your silence meant confusion, that your patience was weakness, that your humility meant you didn't know what was happening. But you knew. You just refused to react on their level because you understood that tests aren't passed by retaliation. They are passed by restraint. And in your restraint, you revealed your spiritual maturity while they revealed their hidden corruption. It is easy to pretend to be good when there is no temptation. But when God sent you someone genuine, loyal, and full of light, it exposed how dark their intentions really were. You became the mirror they couldn't stand to look into. That is why they turned on you, gossiped about you, or tried to discredit you. You reminded them of everything they weren't, and rather than rise higher, they tried to pull you lower. Now the results are in. They thought they were analyzing your worth, but heaven was analyzing theirs. They thought they had the upper hand, but all they did was reveal the limits of their heart. And while they sit wondering why things are collapsing around them, God is marking the paper they didn't know they were writing on. You weren't their victim, you were their test. And when the grades came in, your endurance proved you were chosen, while their actions proved they were counterfeit. Number 5, they thought they escaped accountability because you didn't retaliate. They truly believed that your silence meant surrender. In their eyes, your refusal to fight back was proof that they had won. They mistook your peace for fear, your calm for defeat, and your restraint for guilt. But what they didn't know was that your silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than arguments. You weren't ignoring them. You were handing over the case. God needed you still so he could speak clearly without your emotions interfering with his judgment. Retaliation would have made you look like them. And that is exactly what God was protecting you from. If you had defended yourself too soon, they would have used your reaction as evidence against you. But when you stayed silent, you removed their power. They had nothing to twist, no words to weaponize. You gave God the space to build a record they couldn't manipulate. Every insult, every betrayal, every lie, all of it was entered into his divine system as proof. You weren't losing. You were submitting evidence. They thought they escaped accountability because they didn't see consequences immediately. They assumed your silence meant the matter was closed. But heaven doesn't rush justice. It gathers it. God wasn't ignoring them. He was collecting details. He let them feel comfortable. Let them keep talking, keep boasting, keep believing there would be no fallout, because every careless action was another item on the list. When judgment finally comes, it will not be random. It will be built on a case so airtight that even they will recognize it is fair. Your silence was power disguised as peace. You didn't need to prove anything because time always exposes truth. And when God starts moving, He will not just defend you. He will dismantle every lie they built in your absence. That is why you had to stay quiet. So when He speaks, no one can claim you influenced the outcome. Now, the same silence they mocked is haunting them. Every time something falls apart in their life, they remember how confident they were when you said nothing. You didn't lose by staying silent. You won by letting heaven take the microphone. God doesn't need your voice to deliver justice. He just needs your permission to handle it His way. Their hands are dirty, but the evidence is holy. They used manipulation, deceit, and pride to fight you, believing that control and influence would guarantee their victory. But what they didn't understand is that when you are chosen, the battle isn't fought on human terms. You didn't argue, you didn't scheme, and you didn't try to expose them. You prayed, endured, and waited. That is why the outcome now carries a different kind of authority. The evidence against them isn't man-made, it is divine. It is the kind that cannot be edited, bribed, or erased. Heaven documented what human systems tried to hide when they moved in the flesh. You stayed in the spirit. That separation alone decided the verdict. They dirtied their hands, trying to destroy what they didn't build, while you kept yours clean by refusing to lower yourself. Every time they lied, heaven recorded truth. Every time they cursed your name, heaven wrote a blessing beside it. That is why, even though they looked powerful for a while, the weight of their own actions is now catching up to them. Dirty hands always leave prints, and God knows exactly where to find them. You see, holy evidence isn't just proof of what they did. It is proof of who you are. The same moments they used to humiliate you are now the same moments being used to elevate you. Every betrayal became a brick in your testimony. Every false story became a setup for truth to stand taller. They handled things carnally, but you handled them spiritually, and that is what gave heaven jurisdiction. Now their hands cannot touch what is unfolding. They cannot rewrite the narrative or spin it in their favor because God Himself is the one revealing it. The exposure isn't messy or chaotic. It is precise, clean, and holy. There is no revenge in it, only justice. You didn't have to fight dirty to win. Righteousness fought for you. They thought power was about position, but you learned it is about posture. You knelt and heaven stood up for you. Their fingerprints are all over corruption, but your faith is all over the outcome. That is why when God finally reveals the evidence, no one will question the verdict because the proof will not come from people. It will come from purity. Number 7. God let you lose battles to win the case. There were moments that broke you, times you cried wondering why God didn't intervene, why He allowed the lies to spread, the friendships to collapse, and the opportunities to disappear. It looked like defeat from the outside, but it was actually divine documentation in progress. You weren't losing. You were collecting evidence. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every tear that fell when no one cared was being placed into a heavenly file. God wasn't ignoring your pain. He was building your case. Sometimes God allows temporary losses so the final victory cannot be disputed. If He stopped every attack in its early stages, people would argue that justice wasn't necessary. So instead, He lets the opposition show their true nature. He lets the wrongs pile up until there is so much proof that even your enemies cannot deny what they did. What you thought was abandonment was really strategy, a legal move in a spiritual courtroom where truth doesn't need your defense, just your endurance. Every no you received, every door that slammed, every person who turned their back became part of your testimony. God was allowing you to experience injustice so that when He vindicated you, it wouldn't just be emotional, it would be judicial, the kind of justice that leaves no room for arguments or excuses. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned for undeniable proof. And now the very things that once embarrassed you are becoming evidence that elevates you. Those who mocked you for losing will have to watch as God reveals the reason behind every setback, because the truth is, He never wastes pain. Every unfair moment added credibility to your case. Every silent season was a page in the report. Every false accusation became another witness against them. So when God opens that file, it will not be out of pity, it will be out of principle. He is going to let them see exactly why you had to go through what you did. They will realize too late that while they were celebrating your losses, heaven was preparing their verdict. You weren't losing battles, you were building evidence, and now the case is ready, sealed and about to be judged in your favor. Number 8, they confused mercy for approval. They looked at the silence from heaven and mistook it for consent. They thought, because nothing happened after their lies, their betrayal, or their cruelty, it meant they were in the clear. They convinced themselves that the lack of consequence was proof that God didn't care, or worse, that He agreed with them. But they forgot one of the deepest truths about divine justice. Delay is not approval. It is a warning disguised as grace. God gave them time, not because He was blind, but because He was merciful. He wanted to give them a chance to turn around, to feel conviction, to make things right. But instead of repenting, they took advantage of His patience. They grew bolder, nastier, and more arrogant. They started believing their own illusion, that because they got away with it once, they always would. That is how pride blinds people. It tricks them into thinking mercy means immunity. What they didn't realize is that mercy has an expiration date. God's grace will never contradict His justice. He might let things slide for a season. But when that season shifts, mercy turns into exposure. The same quiet that once protected them becomes the silence before a storm. And when it hits in a way that leaves no doubt that heaven was watching the whole time. God's mercy is meant to lead to repentance, not entitlement. But when people treat it like approval, it transforms into evidence. Every day they mocked truth. Every time they bragged about getting away with it. Heaven was taking notes. They thought the delay was God forgetting, but it was God preparing timing, witnesses, and circumstances that will make the truth unfold with precision. So now, when their exposure finally comes, it will not be chaos, it will be clarity. No one will have to guess why it happened. The pattern will be plain. The same grace that once shielded them will now testify against them. They will realize that the silence they misread as permission was really God's final chance for them to choose humility. They confused mercy for approval, and that confusion became their undoing. God doesn't forget. He just lets people run far enough to prove how unworthy they were of the mercy they mistook for freedom. Number 9. The same people who tried to bury you will be summoned as witnesses. They thought they had erased you. They believed that by discrediting your name, silencing your voice, or turning people against you, they had closed the case forever. But what they didn't know is that God doesn't bury His chosen ones. He plants them. And when the time for harvest comes, the very people who tried to cover your life will be standing in the crowd, forced to watch the growth they swore would never happen. They will not be able to deny it because they will be standing too close to it. God is strategic in his justice. He doesn't just vindicate you privately. He does it publicly, right in front of the ones who plotted against you, not out of spite, but out of revelation. Because when he clears your name, he also exposes their intentions. And what is even more poetic is that they will not need to be called to testify. Their actions will do it for them. Every lie, every rumor, every betrayal will echo as living proof of what they tried to destroy. Their own behavior becomes the evidence that convicts them. They will not be able to hide behind excuses or rewritten stories, because truth doesn't need human permission to surface. God will bring it out in such a way that everyone will see the pattern clearly. Their denials will crumble under the weight of their own history. The people who once said you were finished will have no choice but to witness your restoration, not as spectators, but as unwilling participants in your vindication. And when God delivers the verdict, it will not just be about proving you right. It will be about reminding them that divine justice has a memory. The ones who tried to erase your name will be forced to repeat it. The ones who tried to silence your voice will be made to confirm your truth. That is how thorough heaven's justice is. It turns accusers into witnesses without ever asking their permission. So don't worry about who is watching your rise. They are not there by accident. God invited them. The same people who tried to bury you have front row seats to your redemption because they are part of the evidence. They wanted to end your story. Now they will testify that it was real all along. Number 10, they didn't destroy you. They verified you. Every attack against you was never proof of your weakness. It was confirmation of your importance. If you were insignificant, they wouldn't have wasted their energy trying to tear you down. They saw something in you before you even recognized it fully in yourself. That is why they targeted you. Their resistance wasn't random. It was reactionary. The moment your light started showing, darkness started panicking. Every attempt to destroy you became proof that you carried something worth fearing. You see, when you are chosen, attacks are a form of acknowledgement. The enemy doesn't invest energy in what doesn't threaten him. The gossip, the jealousy, the sabotage, it all served as silent verification that you carried divine weight. They didn't realize it, but every scheme they launched against you was secretly exposing who you were in the spiritual realm. They confirmed your identity by trying to erase it. What is even more powerful is that their failure became your validation. The more they tried to stop you, the stronger you became. What was meant to break you ended up building you. Each hit pushed you deeper into purpose, forcing growth where comfort couldn't reach. You learned endurance through betrayal, wisdom through pain, and discernment through disappointment. They became your unintentional trainers, preparing you for the very destiny they wanted to prevent. They mistook their opposition as dominance, but in truth, they were only helping write your testimony. Their attacks became documentation of your calling. Their lies became the background against which your truth could shine brighter. Without realizing it, they became living proof that you were chosen, because nothing attracts opposition like divine favor, and nothing validates favor like surviving what was designed to destroy you. So when you look back, don't see victims and villains, see verification. See how every door that shut, every rumor that spread, and every betrayal that stung was actually evidence that you were carrying something bigger than yourself. They thought they were ending you, but all they did was announce you. Their failure to break you became heaven's confirmation that you were built for endurance, wrapped in purpose and backed by divine selection. They didn't destroy you. They revealed that you could not be destroyed. Number 11. Their influence protected them once, but it cannot protect them now. There was a time when they seemed untouchable. Their connections shielded them, their titles gave them confidence, and their charm bought them silence. They had power, status, and people who believed every word they said. They used their influence like armor, not to protect truth, but to hide corruption. And for a while it worked. They moved freely, deceived easily, and manipulated situations to their advantage. But influence without integrity has an expiration date, and theirs has just arrived. God never interrupts arrogance too soon. He lets people build their empires of illusion so that when they fall, everyone can see what was really holding them up. Deceit, not destiny. That is why he waited. He let them gather their followers, their lies, and their false confidence, until their web was so tangled that exposure would be undeniable. Now that the mask has worn thin and their networks are visible, their own influence will be their undoing. The same system that once protected them will now testify against them. They believed their image made them safe. They thought their reputation could rewrite truth. But what they didn't understand is that power borrowed through manipulation is never secure. God gave them time to change, to clean their hearts, to use their platform for good. But instead, they used it to control, deceive, and harm. Now their credibility is collapsing under the weight of their hidden sin. No amount of charm, money, or influence can protect them from what is coming. When God strikes, it will not be random or confusing. It will be confirmation. Everyone will see that the fall wasn't a coincidence. It was consequence. He is not just exposing them. He is restoring divine order. Because real power is rooted in purity, and anything built without it is destined to destroy itself. So let them scramble. Let them try to repair the narrative. Let them pretend it is all rumors. It will not matter. The truth has matured, and it is ready to speak. Their influence once made them untouchable, but now it makes them visible. God waited until the lights were brightest, so their fall could be seen by everyone, because when purity returns, pretense must collapse. Number 12. You outlasted the season meant to erase you. There was a time when everything around you was designed to make you disappear. The betrayals, the losses, the silence, the rejection. It wasn't just hardship. It was an assignment. Certain people, circumstances, and environments were sent to drain your spirit, weaken your confidence, and convince you that your purpose was over. They weren't accidents. They were agents of an ending, but what they didn't realize is that God had already written your survival into the script before they even entered the scene. You weren't meant to perish in that storm, you were meant to outlive it. They came with a mission to erase you, to discredit, replace, or silence you. But God let them try, just to prove how impossible that was. He didn't rescue you halfway through. He let them believe they succeeded, only to watch you rise from what was supposed to be your grave. That is why you are still standing. Not because you escaped untouched, but because what was meant to kill you became the soil where your next chapter grew. There is a certain kind of strength that only comes from surviving what was planned to finish you. You didn't just endure, you evolved, you learned discernment, you found resilience, and you discovered that divine protection isn't about avoiding pain. It is about outlasting it. They had a timeline for your destruction, but God extended your timeline beyond their reach. He let their season end while yours was just beginning. The same people who thought they buried you are now realizing they were only planting you. They used every resource, every connection, every ounce of deceit they could muster, and still You are here. Not broken, but refined. Not bitter, but wiser. Because when God decides you will outlive something, no force can shorten your life, limit your purpose, or silence your name. God didn't just keep you alive. He used you as proof that endurance is the loudest revenge. You became living evidence that divine timing always outlasts human intention. Their power expired, their influence faded, and their schemes crumbled. But you remained. They were assigned to your ending, but you became the continuation they never saw coming. God didn't just save you. He outlived them through you. Number 13. Judgment isn't coming. It is already begun. They think they are still safe because lightning hasn't struck. But what they don't realize is that divine judgment rarely announces itself with noise. It begins quietly, subtly, through restlessness, unease, and a haunting sense that something isn't right. They may still be walking around smiling, but inside their peace is gone. The sleepless nights, the unexpected losses, the sudden chaos in places they once controlled, that is not coincidence. That is heaven knocking. The judgment they thought was far off has already started unfolding. God's justice doesn't always arrive with spectacle. Sometimes it starts in the mind, with the same thoughts they used to justify their wrongs now turning against them. The very lies they used to manipulate others are now echoing in their own conscience. They cannot find peace, no matter what they chase, because the spirit they tried to destroy in you is now testifying against them in silence. That is how divine payback works. It hits the soul before it hits the surface. You are not waiting for vengeance. You are watching it mature. Every sleepless night they endure is a reminder that actions have consequences. The blessings they once bragged about are now crumbling from the inside out, and they cannot explain why. Relationships are falling apart. Doors are closing. Money is slipping through their hands, not because someone cursed them, but because heaven is correcting what was unbalanced. Judgment doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like loss, confusion, and the weight of truth settling in. They thought you were forgotten, but God was just silent while He prepared the sentence. And now every area where they sowed deception is producing results they cannot undo. Their own words are turning into traps. Their own pride is dismantling their plans. What they did in secret is being answered in the open. That is why you don't need to gloat or celebrate. The process has already started. God's justice is precise, not delayed. It is already moving through their lives like wind through a field, invisible but undeniable. They may still pretend nothing's wrong, but deep down they know it is over. Judgment isn't coming someday in the future. It is already in motion. Heaven doesn't announce its verdict with a warning. It begins it with a whisper. Number 14. God doesn't need permission to reverse power. There is a kind of authority that no human title can compete with. It doesn't wait for a court date, an election, or anyone's approval. It is divine authority. And when God decides it is time to act, no system, no influence, and no alliance can stop Him. The same people who once strutted through life untouchable, using power as a weapon, are about to learn that the real power never belonged to them. God doesn't ask permission to flip the order of things. He just does it. In 1 second, He can shift the balance. He can take the protected and make them exposed. He can silence the loudest voice in the room and amplify the one they tried to silence. He can turn the very platform they used for deception into the stage where the truth is revealed. That is how He works. Not slowly, but suddenly. One move from Him can undo years of manipulation and dismantle the illusion of control they built around themselves. They built systems, networks, and reputations to shield their wrongs, believing they had insulated themselves from consequence. But what they didn't realize is that God operates both inside and above those systems. He doesn't need to bypass them, he simply repurposes them. The same connections that once defended them will start to distance themselves. The same people who helped cover their actions will now expose them, and the same structure that once celebrated them will turn into the courtroom where justice is carried out. God has a way of flipping everything in such a way that no one can deny his hand was in it. When he reverses power, it doesn't come through revenge, it comes through revelation. He doesn't destroy to humiliate, he exposes to correct. The fall isn't chaotic. It is calculated, everything aligns perfectly. Every mask falls on cue. Every secret surfaces at the exact time it needs to. That is not chance. That is divine orchestration. So when you see positions shifting, titles losing meaning, and hidden truths emerging, understand this isn't politics and it isn't coincidence. It is God reclaiming authority from those who abused it. Justice doesn't knock politely. It enters like it already owns the room, because it does. And when God walks in, power must answer to purity. The verdict has already been written. Everything they did to destroy you became the very evidence used to convict them. Every lie they spoke, every trap they set, every silent betrayal. Heaven recorded it all, not to punish immediately, but to perfect the timing. What looked like delay was divine strategy. You weren't just surviving. You were standing in the middle of a courtroom while God quietly built his case. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was simply the stillness before divine reversal. Now the tables have turned, and the truth that was buried is resurfacing with power. You see, when God judges, he doesn't just remove, he replaces. He doesn't just expose, he elevates. He takes the very soil they tried to bury you in and turns it into the platform that announces your vindication. The downfall of the wicked isn't random, it is redemptive. It shows the world that purity still wins, that endurance still matters, and that no corruption lasts forever. They thought they were untouchable, but their power had an expiration date. God let them sit high long enough to reveal their own arrogance. He let them taste influence so he could show the difference between man-made elevation and divine placement. And now the shift has already begun quietly, spiritually, legally, visibly. The same people who once mocked your prayers will soon witness why they were never in vain. Because God's justice isn't reactionary. It is revolutionary. It doesn't wait for applause. It arrives with evidence. So don't worry about proving your worth or defending your name. The same hand that hid you is the hand that is now revealing the truth. God doesn't need approval to act, and he doesn't need permission to reverse the order. He can dismantle an empire with a whisper, elevate a nobody in a second, and restore everything that was taken from you in ways that defy logic. You didn't lose, you were positioned. You weren't forgotten. You were being prepared. And now the season of exposure has arrived, not to shame you, but to crown you. If this message spoke to you, don't just scroll away. Stay connected. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment below, sharing what part resonated most with you. And if you know someone who needs this truth, share it with them right now. Let's keep spreading messages that awaken, heal, and remind the world that divine justice is never late. It is just perfectly timed. Stay blessed, always.